All right, that started. Thank you to everyone who's joining us this evening. And if you want to share where you're joining us from, please feel free to put that in the chat. This is the other reason I wanted to be home, so I could have my big screen. And we're just gonna, those of you who have all joined already, thanks so much. And we're gonna give it a few more minutes, let people kind of join in, and then we'll get started. Hope everyone's doing well and having a good evening so far. And I think for Rashod, you guys can all see the chat too, so you should be able to see where people are joining us from and chiming in.
See.
I feel like that's been a fun way with the webinar to be able to kind of, you know, we're not seeing everyone's face, but to be able to connect a little where everybody's joining from. So.
Oh, I should turn my thing off.
I should probably put mine on.
And we'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we're gonna get started. All right. I'm going to give it just one more minute and then we're going to get moving. All right, so we're gonna get started. So welcome everyone again. I'm Samantha Johnston. I'm the Executive Director and Curator at Colorado Photographic Arts Center. And I have one of the install images of the exhibit with Rashod's work behind me. Thanks so much for joining us this evening for this panel. As part of Month of Photography, we're really excited to have Alanna and Narkita and Rashod joining us this evening. A big thank you to all of our sponsors. And this is your first programming with us. We have lots of programming going on throughout the month. Please check out denvermock.org, which has all sorts of free programming, virtual programming, programming in person if you're in Colorado. But again, we have, because of the pandemic, we have a lot of great programming online as well. So, and then tonight, this is being recorded and we will be putting it up on our website. And we will be utilizing the Q&A feature this evening. So thanks for chiming in chat with where you're joining us from. But the Q&A makes it a little easier with the webinar. So please utilize that feature this evening. If you have questions, we're going to leave a handful of time to be able to talk through that and have kind of a dialogue. So I just want to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our artists. They're each going to share about their practice tonight and the work that they're making in the show. And as I said, a big part of the exhibition for me is creating a place to engage in conversation. And so I really wanted to create space for that tonight. We're so excited to be presenting Month of Photography for the first time as an organization. This is a biennial festival that was founded by Mark Sink. And without his hard work, this photography festival would not exist. So we're excited to be taking leadership on this year. And so for us, we always have a big exhibit for Month of Photography and portfolio review weekend. And I spend a lot of time thinking about this time and the exhibit. I spent a lot of time thinking about the events of this last year specifically, and really wanting to create a space and create an exhibition that amplified voices. And so I brought these 3 projects together, using portraiture as kind of the original connector, and then really thinking about photography as a record. And I just wanted to share a little bit before the artists start speaking about their work. You know, Alanna's tribute to Black culture as realized through characteristics of Dutch portraiture and the Harlem Renaissance. Narkita's revealing portraits of Denver's Black community seen through bright, colorful backgrounds. And Rashod's testimony of the Black American experience documented through an intimate study of family. And it's my honor to show these artists who reflect identity and race and legacy in their own way through the art of portraiture. So thank you, all 3 of you, for being here tonight and for sharing about your practice and your work. So we're gonna kick it off, and I'm gonna have Alanna get started and speak about her work.
Thank you, Samantha. Thanks for having me. And I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. As Samantha mentioned, this is the work that I currently have up for the Month of Photography. It is the Golden Age series. It is a set of 10 portraits, sort of based on Dutch portraiture. I spent a lot of time as a kid in museum spaces and, you know, was absolutely enthralled with these, you know, these rooms where these portraits lived and these still lives, and the lighting, and was just captivating to me. And so, you know, as I sat there and studied these paintings, I sort of got a great education on lighting, which I incorporate into my photography style. But also, you know, it started me questioning the ideas around how we see and how we are seen, and who gets to be seen, and in what spaces we get to be seen. And so, you know, it really took me on this journey of wanting to reclaim and recapture our stories and the spaces that I felt like we were left out of, but you know, had the capacity to embody and inhabit. And so I wanted to put us into those spaces next to those same portraits that I would see in those rooms. So in doing that, I came up with Golden Age to honor Blackness and to honor Black people in the art spaces. Also, it was important for me to show Black people in a way that was abundant and colorful and powerful, and to sort of leave that as a way to counter some of the negative stereotypes and messaging that we often see through the media about Blackness. So it was a counter to that I felt like I needed to see. And if I felt like I needed to see that, I knew that other people needed to see that as well. The portraits themselves are people that I know, or friends of friends, and they're all my friends now, but at the time, some of these people were like one person removed from me. And I have to say that the getting to know the sitters during the process of making this work has been one of the most beautiful experiences. Not only do I now have lifelong friends from the people that I have photographed, but I'm just so honored at the way that they embodied these characters. and we sort of did it together. I didn't tell them what to do or how to sit or how to be. We draped the fabric over them and allowed them to have a character sort of come through that I was able to capture. And so it really was a collaborative effort between me and all of the sitters, and really I couldn't have done it without them. The work itself, which I'll probably go into a little bit later on, is finished with a varnish to sort of carry through the painterly feel. And it's really important for me in my work that, you know, the finishing part of it is just as important as the making of the photograph. It's all a part of this, of telling the story. And so finishing it in this way allowed it to live as a painting would. You get to see the brushstrokes, and it doesn't necessarily have to live behind glass, you know. And so I love the livability of that and the immediacy that having these pieces without the glass gives you. It allows you to have a nice sort of relationship that you get to form through that experience. And also the way that I like to hang the images where there's sort of a little bit lower where you can make eye contact with the people was also very important to me, especially for the Black men that are photographed in this series. So often Black men don't get the respect of being looked at in the eye. And I felt like it was important to be able to have this conversation. So yeah, so the finishing of it, the hanging of it, the producing of the portraits themselves, and people that and the wardrobe and the lighting all come into play to create this story that is one of empowerment and an abundance. And so yes, I'm really excited for it to be shown in Denver with CPAC. Thank you.
And I just had to finish with this image. They're all 10 of them are just so fantastic in the space. So if you are in Colorado and you can get to the gallery, please do come by. Narkita, do you want to talk about your project?
Sure. So Black in Denver is a portrait interview series that investigates identity. I photographed 100 people, both locals and transplants to Denver. And it's just been a collaborative effort. The whole project started in 2018 and ended in 2020. So it's been 2 years long. I use a spectrum of background colors to represent the diversity and Blackness. When I have the space, we like to assemble the photos in a grid from cool to warm to communicate the message that we span. And I play with color repetition too to communicate our interconnectedness. In my interviews, I use the empathetic listening component of an ethnography to gather insights that otherwise might not be apparent, uncover new and alternative storylines, and gain an understanding of the community using the self. So that's a really big part of my work, is just the interviews and the photos. I learned many things speaking to all these people. They are also have become my friends. They've become part of my community. I have learned that Denver's Black community fosters a culture of authenticity, which to me is a reflection of love. So to me, this project really is about the power of love. I really hope my work acts as a counter narrative to the narrative created by the mainstream media, and raise awareness about the power of being oneself and inspire the practice of self-inquiry. My questions in my interviews are, who are you? What does it mean to be you? And what does it mean to be you here? So we really get down into the individual when we speak, which I think when we connect and we talk, it really opens up to this powerful image that I use to document each conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Rashod, you're up.
All right, let me get myself off mute. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thanks again, Samantha, too, for this. I really appreciate it, and the opportunity to be, showing with these wonderful ladies here. It's been great. My work that's being shown is called Little Black Boy. So really, it's documenting my son LJ's life. I've been photographing him for about 5 years now. But the what I really are trying to get to is really this idea of the Black experience and Black family, and kind of piggybacking off what's been said already, is just there's this view in the media that it doesn't necessarily look at Black families, and the images and things that we get with that are really typically negative. So I wanted to portray our family life, and specifically growing up as a Black boy, so people can kind of get that experience. And then while I do that, I'm still really exploring just not only his childhood, but me being a father, anxieties, things that I'm apprehensive about as it pertains to him growing up, and teaching him how to really just navigate the world that we live in. I like to use a lot of symbolism, and really have this duality with these. A lot of the images are just kind of everyday photos, but I really want to challenge the viewer to look deeper into them, um, to kind of get that point across. For this image, for instance, it's called Reflection of Me. I'm really into legacy, and I think it comes from growing up. My mom always took pictures, and we had all these photo albums, and I really looking through those family albums and learning about my history, my great grandfather, and all that kind of just made a big impact on me, and wanting to leave something behind, really just a record with photographs. And this image is really about me being halfway in the frame, and knowing that as parents and adults, at some point, we're not going to be here. We're kind of, time is this thing that no one can get away from. And I just kind of just think about him growing up, and what I'm teaching him, and if he'll remember those things, and just grow up to be a great man. And I just think that reflection of me is really important. But a lot of the images in the series, which is still ongoing, just really depict everyday life, and I try to extract just what it is to be a Black little boy growing up, and how I'm kind of really just doing the best I can to train him, even though at some points I feel inadequate in things. But it's just a joy just to be able to spend time with him, and show others the series. And I feel like a lot of people can connect to it, so it's been great.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I want to ask if you kind of elaborate more. So I guess I'm going to start with you, Rashod. If you can talk a little bit more about, I think you kind of all touched a little bit about that collaboration, or that, portraiture, working with the subject. It isn't just, oh, I'm putting this person in this place. How, so like, I guess to start with you, like about photographing LJ, how is that process, like with him involved with it? Is it, I know it's more everyday images, but if you can elaborate more on that.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I think he's 5 now, so he's definitely taken more of a collaborator role in the images. He's definitely not shy to say, "Hey, I don't want to take any pictures, Daddy. Leave me alone." So I think with that, I try to always approach it with as much spontaneity as possible, and being loose, and say, "Hey, why don't we sit over here with the flag? How do you like that?" Kind of get him, coerce him to do what I need him to do. But sometimes, like for instance, the picture of him in the fort, he had already built that fort with just things in our living room. And he comes upstairs and says, Daddy, come take a picture. I made a fort. I'm like, okay, great. And he had already put the flag on. So I really didn't really have to do much. I just said, hey, get in the fort and look at me. And, some of the images just are like that, even though I'm shooting large format, which, for everyone out there, it's a little bit of a cumbersome process. It's not just like your everyday snapshots. So it does take some work to get everything in focused and exposure and lighting and all that. So he does a great job of being still. But yeah, he's definitely more of a collaborator at this point.
Nice. Awesome. And Alanna, can you speak a little bit more? I mean, you touched on it a little when you were speaking earlier, but just kind of that collaboration piece, like how that, I think that's an important part of portraiture and kind of how, that work is being made when that collaboration is happening. And that's what I really like about all the work that you're all making. So.
Yeah, it is a really, I mean, obviously, because you're photographing a human being. And so there needs to be a connection, for me, the connection part is really important. It's more than just having somebody come in and sit down and then you take their picture. There has to be a comfort. There has to be this, this rapport that's built up and a trust that allows them to be able to sort of expose themselves, to be photographed in that way. And so, yeah, like I was saying, some of these people that I photographed were friends already. So we already had that trust built and that rapport built, but then there were others that I was just meeting for the first time. And, with them, I would sit and take a little bit longer and get to know them. And really it was through the draping of the fabric and, which basically just came out of a Rubbermaid bin. It was just fabric remnants really. And so, through the draping of that, the whole thing sort of just came to life. And it was really my job to sort of stay out of the way of what was coming through at that point and allow them to just, have that space to show themselves, and so that, a lot of the portraits or all the portraits that I got out of this series were a huge surprise to me because none of it was necessarily planned in that way. So seeing the end result of that was absolutely, part of the collaboration between me and them, and then this beautiful outcome. And it couldn't have happened without them and without leaving that space for them to just sort of come through in that way.
And did the titling kind of come through beforehand or after? How did that play like a role? After?
After, yeah. So I think with the exception of two of them, they're all named Saint something or other. And the something or other part is a street or landmark in Harlem. And it was important for me to do that because it was a way for me to sort of anchor in our Renaissance and our legacy and our sort of creative blossoming and wanting to pay homage to that, especially in a time when Harlem is being completely gentrified, and we're losing a lot of those spaces and we're losing a lot of those landmarks. And so, it was a way for me to sort of keep that in. And I named them, the naming convention was really interesting too, because I knew that I wanted that. Like I knew I wanted a saint, landmark or street. I knew that. Who got to be whom was really just a matter of what was being projected. Like Saint Sugar Hill was obviously going to be Sugar Hill. I mean, who else could she possibly be? She just sort of embodies that, and she embodies the Langston Hughes poem, so it all just was very organic in nature, but it all worked really well.
Oh, absolutely. Awesome. And Narkita, you touched on it a little, but I just want to give a little more time to it because I feel like the questioning and the inquiry is like, I know that drew me in early on to your work and, following Black in Denver on Instagram and just kind of like loving the color and the portraits, but then also taking the time to read about, what each person does or what their feelings are. So I guess if you can just touch a little more on that.
Right. So my process is starting with the survey. So I have them fill out just a Google form where they just answer some of my basic questions, which allows me to develop additional questions and kind of get to know who they are, and sometimes even determine what backdrop I'll use for their portrait. So for me, I really put a lot of weight on the conversation and listening more than anything. I think the conversation component creates a connection. So like Alanna mentioned, and it produces a powerful image. So I begin each conversation with these series of questions like, who are you? Tell me about yourself. That's a big question. That's a really big question. And then I follow up with prompts based on what they share. And then based on all of that, I ask, who are you? And what does it mean to be you, based off of everything you just told me. And it really opens them up to just being comfortable and vulnerable and like just in a space where they can really like show who they are and know that like we're in a safe space to do that, right? And with my background colors, sometimes I will select the color based on someone they're already connected to in the series. So there's a yoga teacher who's connected to another yoga teacher in Denver, and I put them both in front of like blue. And then this one woman I interviewed, she was sitting in her house. Her house was completely purple. Her nails were purple. Her shirt was purple. She's the color purple. So I put her in front of the purple. Someone else talked about being a sunflower. So I put them in front of the yellow, you know? So it's a lot of listening and understanding and honoring who they are and connecting them with a color that will bring that out even more.
Nice. I love that. Awesome. Well, I have other things too, but we have a few questions that have come in. So someone asked you talk about wanting to create a different narrative from what the media portrays. Was there a certain time or event in your life that made you want to create this different narrative? And whoever wants to take that first.
I can go first. I studied public relations in college. So for me, I took a mass media and society class, and I realized the profound impact that the mass media has on the self, right? And how we see ourselves, how we see each other. And I also learned that Sigmund Freud was the uncle of the father of public relations. And to me, that was just like, wait, propaganda, psychology, like I was putting all these pieces together and I realized that all of this stuff was done intentionally, you know, and that I wanted to be in PR, not only to help create a new narrative, but being an artist, I knew that I also wanted to push back on that as well. So, yeah.
Rashod, Alanna. Thoughts on that question?
Sure. I've got thoughts. I've got lots of thoughts.
Oh, she got lots of thoughts.
Right. I was like, come on.
I can feel it coming. We ready.
Want to
go? No, go ahead. Okay.
I mean, that question, was there a time? I mean, it feels like my whole life, there are all these opportunities where I realize that the narrative is so one-sided. And, you know, I can't tell you that there was a defining moment when I thought I really want to tackle, you know, these narratives and shift it. I think that it was just it's just always been there. It is what it is. But I think for me, what led up to this point was working in advertising for over 20 something years, something similar to what Narkita was saying, you know, and you just see the messaging that continues to go out and how damaging it is and how one-sided it is and how, you know, it's not even coming from us. Like, it's not even our story that we're projecting. These are stories that are being completely made up by media companies, by advertising companies, by whoever benefits and profits from oppressing other people, right? You know, it's coming from them, and we basically have to spend our lives fighting these stories. And so it's exhausting. While I was working in these offices, I think during this time that I made this project, there was a lot of stuff going on in the media, in the news around Ferguson, around Black Lives Matter was really starting to form at that point, you know, and I just was so exhausted from seeing all of this stuff every single day, just so exhausted. And I thought, I have to send out a different message. Like, I have to say something different, because if this is all that we're going to get is seeing Black bodies hurt, Black bodies dead, Black bodies being ridiculed, Black bodies being mocked, you know, if I have to see this all the time, then what else is there? And if I can just put something else out into the zeitgeist, into the world, then at least that's something, you know, that's a different message. That's like something that we can choose to listen to instead of this other stuff. So I think for me, it was just a moment of being fed up of listening to it all. Really.
Rashod.
I mean,
You're like, I'm good. I have nothing else to add.
I don't know if I have too much to add there, but just say ditto. I mean, you know, I agree with everything that's been said. You know, it's one of those things that's a kind of a piling on effect in life when you live in America and you see these images in the media and advertising. I guess for me, all of that is true. And I guess I go back to, oh man, a lot of different spots. But I guess for me, just being becoming a father, that really hit me differently, because I want my son to have more opportunities than I do. And then what his life is looking like now, it's like you don't see, you know, Black people represented properly. And you know, when I think about the history books, like he's learning about, you know, Thanksgiving, and we don't talk about Indigenous people, and then you don't talk about like there's so many things in history that is we're X'd out, right? We don't get the full story, we don't get the full truth. And then on top of that, you know, even with the full truth, you don't see the greatness of, you know, the Black pioneers, the trailblazers who were here a long time ago that were doing things. So I think for me, it was more of him understanding his history, and then also beyond that, just having those people that he can look up to that look like him, whether it's in corporate arenas, whether it's a doctor, lawyer, I mean, whatever that is, you know, I really want him to be able to see that. And I think for me with the work, you know, I want other people to see a different side, kind of what everyone's been saying, a different side of the coin, really a realistic side. I mean, because the thing is, I'm not portraying anything that's not true. Like this is just how we live our life. But I think people connect because there's just not a lot of images of tenderness in Black families or between a father and son. And they see that and they're like, oh, wow, I connect with that. So for me, it's all of that is in there.
It is that tender, like those picture, like LJ, all the work. I mean, obviously I'm at the gallery every day. So each day I kind of spend a little more time in front of each body of work. And so someone had a question, Rashod, for you about if you plan to continue the chronology through adulthood, like with LJ.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. But I do think though, with the title Little Black Boy, I'll probably put a book in at some point, you know, as he gets, you know, a little bit before teenage, adolescence, somewhere in there. I'll feel it, and I'm sure he'll tell me when he's done with me and tired of this. But I will photograph him as much as possible as I can. But I definitely think, I don't know what age, but before he becomes a teenager, I think I can kind of close at least this chapter, and hopefully, you know, get a book out or something.
Until middle school happens and the angst starts to
Right. Well, maybe if he can see some cool pics, or maybe if he like sees this cool picture out in the world, then he can tell his friends like, "Oh, I'm famous," you know, and then I can kind of get in. Yeah.
And Alanna, someone had a specific question. Did you know the extent of your project and how much did you share with each sitter?
I did not know the extent of this project. It was quite a surprise to me as it started to unfold and I started to realize what was happening. And so there really wasn't a whole lot that I could share with the sitters. I took the first photo that I did was St. Madison, and I actually photographed her for a friend. one of my friends who's actually in the series as well. I'm so sorry. I've got a little bit of brain fog. I'm recovering from COVID, so forgive me. My friend has her son and her daughter in the project as well. And so I had originally photographed her daughter for a book cover that she was working on. My friend is an author. And as I was photographing her, this photo came out and I thought, oh, I'm keeping this one. This one's mine. And I kept looking at it and thinking like, wow, there's something here and I want to keep exploring this. I don't know what this is yet. And so I invited more people in and I showed the next woman that I photographed, St. Lennox. I showed her this photo and said, you know, I want to continue doing this, investigating this. So she sat for me and we draped her, and you know, St. Lennox came out and it just sort of continued. And it were probably around like the third or fourth portrait in, I started to realize, oh, there's a lot coming out here. There's a lot of stuff that I have like pulled back that I'm starting to see, and I'm starting to see this overlap and this connection around all my inspiration that I took in these portrait rooms, and how we were not included in those spaces, and so like the whole story just started to emerge and unfold, and then I started to see this really wonderful, beautiful overlap with the Dutch Renaissance and the Harlem Renaissance, and how they both sort of emerged out of these times of crisis and strife, and like this creativity blossomed forward. And so, you know, it just became this sort of honoring of who we are as a Black culture and how much that we have given creatively to this world. And so, yeah, the whole thing was quite a surprise to me as I started working on it. But, you know, one of the things that I learned through this process was that I have to stay out of the way of whatever this is that's working through me, because the minute that I tried to control it and I tried to shape it and make it into something, it didn't work. Like the sitters were uncomfortable, the draping didn't work, the stories didn't come through, the characters didn't come through. So it kept me in a place of just like finding this balance around allowing this thing to sort of unfold the way it wanted to unfold, and me being sort of not the driver, but like the passenger seat of it, you know, and guiding it, the co-pilot for it. So I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
No,
but,
it does.
Okay. Because it makes a lot of sense in my brain, but I know sometimes when I talk about it, it can sound a little like, you know, but yeah, so the whole thing was very much a surprise.
But I think also thank you for sharing about that process. And I think that that's, you know, for those people who are joining us tonight, who are photographers or artists themselves, I think, you know, sometimes that pressure is put on the artist of like, oh, I need to make the thing and have the project. And I think that it's important to hear that as work for all artists, as it develops, it takes time. And sometimes you just have to let it do its thing and not force it, because to your point, it's not coming through, it isn't doing, you know, you could see the difference when you were like, no, that's not working. So I think that's an important thing to think about. So
and it is interesting because I talk to other photographers who seem to have a plan. Like they're like, I want to shoot this project and I want it to look like this. And I think, wow, how nice to be able to like plan something out like that. I wish I could do that. You know, that doesn't really work for me. I have to sort of surrender to whatever it is. And so sometimes the work is there, sometimes it's not. And it's a scary process sometimes.
No, I think that's fantastic. Someone else asked, kind of to the group, what do you find to be the most difficult part of trying to shift the narrative regarding Black representation? What roadblocks have you encountered and how did you overcome them as a professional artist? Whoever wants to take that first. Everyone's thinking about it.
I guess I can start.
You got it, Rashod.
I don't know if I've had too many roadblocks, and I haven't been making art for, that long either. I will say this though, I will say that the heightened awareness, I would say for sure, even just from last year with George Floyd, has definitely, at least in my opinion, impacted people's awareness and ability to at least empathize, and then also be more open for more Black representation, right? And you see more of, hearing of Black stories, whether it's in the media, editorial, things like in the art world. So I think that's a good thing, because I think historically, obviously, we haven't really seen that. So I think my question back is almost like, I personally haven't experienced the pushback,
Mhm.
but I just hope that this new reality continues, because when things are not in the news or things are not happening or people are not marching, people tend to forget pretty quickly, right? So it'll be interesting, and I hope things continue to move forward for representation, but I still think it's going to be a fight in terms of artists like us continue to make work that's important and that pushes the boundaries, to kind of keep, really just to keep things in the open and out in front of people.
Mhm. Absolutely. Alanna, Narkita, either of you.
I have thoughts on this because I feel like the most difficult part about shifting the narrative is being taken seriously, first of all, and that's this is a whole other soapbox I got going on right now. But when, as Black artists, I feel like over the last few years we've been trending, right? It's like hot to be a Black artist right now, especially in February. And to me, that kind of like dilutes what we're doing and what we're trying to say. And so I really think that the roadblocks that I've experienced or that I've seen is that we can easily get lumped in together and our message completely not heard. Or just sort of disregarded as like, those are the Black photographers, those are the Black artists, this is what they have to say, stick it in a box, put it over there, and it's a little frustrating to me that, I don't feel like we're really able to have the depth of conversation that I'd like to have around these subjects. So I think that can be a challenge, as a professional artist and making work around this narrative. And it's not, it just happens to be part of our experience. We're all multifaceted, multi-dimensional human beings. We're not just, like very sort of surface in what we're trying to say, but this is our experience as Black people in this country. And so the fact that we have to continue to talk about this because this experience continues to persist, it makes me wonder, are we diluting the conversation by talking about it so much? Or I just have questions around like how these messages are being presented, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Narkita, do you have any?
I don't. I think everyone aired everything
Nope,
that I
that's good. No, it is. I mean, and Alanna and I spoke, I don't know, we've spoken a few times on the phone about, just how work is being represented, that it shouldn't just be Black History Month, and it shouldn't just be International Women's Day, and it needs to be throughout the year. That representation needs to be accounted for, and it's important, and it needs to be happening across the board for all artists of color, Indigenous, BIPOC, like all of it. So yeah, absolutely. We have a few questions for you, Narkita. Someone asked, what methods did you use to get subjects for your series? Is there any regrets in your series, something you would improve on? And are there anything you want to expand on going forward?
Yeah, so as far as the methods to find subjects, it's been pretty organic. When I moved to Denver 6 years ago, I didn't have any connections, I didn't have any friends, I had no community. So a lot of this was also just creating a community for myself. So first I asked a yoga teacher, and then I asked a local business owner that I knew, and I asked a friend. And then from there, I asked everyone to pay it forward. And then I asked someone else to pay it forward. So it's been just like people recommending folks in the community as I go. And when I'm out in community, if I hear someone talking about their own healing, talking about their, their evolution of self, or just, what the community is all about, I'll select those folks, just because I really think about cultural perpetuity in my work a lot, and like leaving something behind. So I'm always thinking about healing and liberation and authenticity and all of that. So yeah, it's just been very organic and just a lot of listening. As far as regrets, let's see. It's just been a learning experience, and I think I just really stepped into the unknown when I started my work. So I think with everything, when you step into the unknown, there are some things that you may have wanted to change, but I can't say there's been a lot. So yeah.
Nice. And someone had also asked, like, do Narkita or Alanna, do either of you provide prints to your subjects after their shoot?
I don't after the shoot, but it is a plan of mine to give everyone a print. So,
Yeah.
I was like, Alanna, yours are gigantic. So maybe a smaller print.
We work it out. We work it out. If I haven't given all of my sitters a print, then I plan on it or something. They are big prints, so I definitely don't give anything out of the edition. It would just be like a smaller sort of a gift to them. So, but yes, I do want to always make sure that I pay back however I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And then are you making your prints yourself? I didn't get a chance to ask you that in all the times we talked.
The Golden Age ones, no, those I did not print myself. I did sit with a printer, a friend of mine, and we collaborated together like a long time, days, like actually a couple of weeks, just fine tuning everything, all the colors. So yeah.
No, it's someone asked that question the other day, and I was like, I need to ask her. I'm not sure. Because a lot, specifically with your work, a lot of they're like, what is the varnish? What, people are really interested. And I think the scale and the size of the work lends itself to that people, to your point, that piece of like you're walking in and you're kind of almost eye level with these images, and they're really powerful. Okay. We have some more questions. I mean, I have things, but I'm like, and again, if people have questions, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A. We answered that one. How do you feel about the additional responsibility of social messaging and counter narrative as a Black artist in the US? How do you navigate these responsibilities?
I can start. I feel like at least for me, you do feel it. I mean, we kind of touched on it earlier. Just being a Black artist, you do have this kind of weight that's unsaid just because I'm a Black artist making work, and I do also make work about being Black, right? So I feel like it is there. But at the same time, I guess I'm just going to be myself. I make work for myself, and it's my self-expression. So I lead with that because it makes me happy. I can work out my feelings and all that stuff. But, I think a part of me it's in the back of my mind that like the work that I'm making is important, and that it does represent, Black America, Black life, and I want to do that justice in a way, right? So I think just me being authentic helps with that. That's kind of how I navigate, because I'm just being real. So you don't have to navigate much if you're just being honest and 100% yourself. So that's what I try to do as much as I can, and it makes it a lot easier. Even though there is this weight and this expectation, which sometimes is fair, sometimes it's not. Because sometimes I don't want to be the representation of all Black people, all Black men, or no one wants that, right? So I think sometimes it could be unfair to put that on artists to say everything you make is what being Black is about, and it's not true per se.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Anyone else have any other comments to add to that?
Yeah, I also just try and be myself and just step into that authenticity, because I know that that's my superpower, and just to tell stories in a way that honor each individual and honor the collective. So
yeah. Thinking about kind of how you work through your someone said breaking it up into percentages. How is artistic drive? How much is social pursuit and crafting narratives? How much is pure desire just to create?
So I can say with my series, it really did start as an existential crisis. Like I was going through some stuff and needed to get through it. So I decided to get through it by talking to people. But as I began to talk to people, I started to notice some things and notice patterns, and really, Samantha, just really get into the storytelling element of my work and being strategic in my storytelling, and allowing the photo to cause intrigue. But then once you get into the story, there are all these different layers and elements to what these people are saying, which makes that photo even come to life even more. So yeah, it's, I think it's a mixture of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone else have a
math right now, so I'm not gonna
Oh,
try percentages. But I will say that to me, it's kind of all the same thing. Like it's hard to divide it up, right? Like my creative pursuits are so much tied into who I am, and who I am is tied into my social actions. So I don't know how to necessarily divide that up. And I wish I could, because sometimes I would love to just like make photos of trees or something like that doesn't necessarily have a deep social commentary to it, but it's always going to be in there. That social commentary is always going to be put in there because I made it and because my skin happens to be brown. But so it's hard to divide that up. But I would say that, like, yeah, it's all a desire to create, and it's all a desire to express, and just like any other artist, like that's what it's about.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. I know someone asked if I'm going to do a screen share one more time to just show the install shots, because someone asked about that. And then someone else had asked, what do you find to have the most influence on your work? Media, film, current events, individual creative development, other photographers? Whoever wants to.
I'll start. That's a good question. I would say just living, if that's an answer. I mean, I guess I think of it holistically, like even from my upbringing, from art school, art history, from being an adult. I think you take it all in, and that really shapes my work, my personal experiences. I do think that the media and things they do have some type of influence on my work. Obviously, when we talk about representation and the lack of it, yes. But I would just kind of say, for me, a lot of it comes just from this need to create work and document my family and how important they are to me. So I kind of just, that's really my main influence is them. And then, I mean, there's obviously other photographers. Gordon Parks, and I really do like Sally Mann. Her work with her immediate family. And sometimes I even think about that, because there's not any. If you think of her work, and then you think of are there any African American photographers that are well known for documenting their family at that level? And there's really not. So I don't know. I think I kind of look at it from a standpoint of, well, I want to show people what that looks like. I mean, not like Sally Mann per se, but just because it's not out there in the world. So for me, it's almost like I'm influenced by what's not there just as much as what is there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I can speak to that. Because a portion of my work is research, I really allowed the people to influence whatever like path I went down. So, early on, there was a theme of authenticity that came up. So I followed the authenticity route. And then, I had a lot of spiritual folks at one point. And then I thought I was done with the project. And then, Ahmaud was murdered. And that just sparked this whole new like motivation to keep going. And then Brianna, and all of it just kept me from like it motivated me to continue to move forward with the project. So I would say, the people who've been in the series, who've led me down this path, and then some of current events too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, current events definitely do play a huge role in what drives me. That and also just speaking with people, just having conversations, talking to all types of people about their experience, about what it's like to be them in this country, in this world. It really, I think there's really something to be said about getting in there with people and developing that empathy and that, the empathy muscle and being able to understand other experiences that then I can sort of compare and contrast against my own, and so all of that definitely does help to drive my work. And music, a lot of music.
Great. Well, any other, I'm always a big fan of leaving time. Oh, one more question just popped in. I like to leave time for questions because I always feel like that at panels and discussions that time isn't always left, and it's really important to me. So someone just asked, do you fear you'll be trapped in an identity like a rock star who wants to try something new, but the audience wants to hear the oldies?
I've had this conversation a lot lately about are Black artists obligated to touch on Black horror, and yeah, I mean, I have so much like work that has nothing to do with being Black, that I would love to show, but I feel that, sometimes we are trapped in this category of, only focusing on these subjects and these topics. So it's something that I've talked about a lot lately and would love to push up against it because I'm multidimensional. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure. Ditto. There we go. Ditto. I like that answer. No, I would agree. That does happen in terms of having more to say or something different, and maybe not putting it out there just because of, I think I do at least just self-impose, like, well, all my work looks like this. So if I start doing this, then no one's going to like it. And, you have these weird thoughts. And, I try to work through that because I do have some series and some ideas that have nothing to do with what work I've been making. But I guess for me, I'm just drawn to this work so much that like that's all I'm focused on. But I hope once this is done, and even maybe simultaneously, that we continue to work on some other projects and then kind of put it out there. Because ultimately, I mean, I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens. So.
Yeah, I do get a little concerned with the response they received from the Golden Age series that I'm going to be expected to continue to make work that looks like that, which doesn't make sense. Like it makes sense for me to have done that for this series because that's what it was about, right? So, I get a lot of questions about the lighting and the process of making the work look painterly, and I yeah, it has given me pause to think that, okay, well, this is what people are expecting of me now, but that's not what I'm going to continue to produce, because it makes sense only when it makes sense, and that's it, you know. So I feel like it is easy to allow yourself to get pigeonholed if you start to think like you need to be making a product, but that's not what I'm doing as an artist. I'm expressing something that is important to me, and however that expression comes about, whatever it is that I'm trying to say, will also lead me to the materials that I need to use and the different processes that I'll explore in order to tell the best story that I can.
Nice. Yeah. All right. We're going to take one last question. And if each of you could just touch briefly on how or why you chose photography as your creative vehicle.
I think for me, for the project that I'm doing right now, it made the most sense. But I'm moving into mixed media art installations. So it's going to be a whole different ballgame for me coming up. So yeah, it just made the most sense for what I was doing at the time.
I have a deep love for photography. And I also have the openness to be able to explore other mediums as like I was saying, as I need to in order to tell the best story that I can. And so, but photography to me, it's so funny because I remember when I first decided, like, yes, this is my medium of choice. I kind of did it because I couldn't paint. Because I was a frustrated painter. But really, it makes the most sense for me. And I love the medium. I have so much more that I'm learning. I'm about to go into film, and I've got an 8x10 camera that's being made for me lovingly for a new project that's coming up. And so I'm exploring different realms of the photo world as well. And so I just feel like I'm not done with it. And I don't see myself ever really fully being done with it. Even if I go and I explore something else that I bring back to it, this is always, I feel like, going to be my home.
Nice. Rashod, beyond your excitement about
this
new 8x10
camera. I just got excited. What's the question? She said 8x10. I'm lost. Like, what? Oh, we gotta talk after this. Man, what's the question again? It's about art making, right?
About how you came to photography as your choice or your creative vehicle.
Oh man. Oh, you know, I identify with Elena there because I actively avoided painting with all my might in college. So didn't paint. I drew a little bit, didn't work out, not a writer. You know, I think photography is just my thing. And, you know, I just have a deep appreciation and love for it as my medium of choice. Now, it's funny I say I don't like to write, but when my mentor is like, hey, you need to start writing. I'm like, what? I don't want to write. But honestly, I'll say this, like writing and practicing and writing like every day has definitely opened my eyes more to just another way to express myself and communicate and, you know, hopefully interact that more with even, you know, Little Black Boy or other series that I've been doing. So yeah, I try to stay open. Photography is the main deal though, but I try to dabble in writing. Everything else we'll see.
Nice. Well, I want to thank all three of you so much for joining us this evening, for talking, for sharing about your practice. I'm so excited we have this work up into April. It's an honor. Thank you for all you're doing, all the work you're making as artists. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. This is recorded. We will be putting it on the website. So thank you again for a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thanks a lot.
And everyone have a wonderful evening, and please check out denvermop.org, and we have lots more programming through the rest of the month and lots more virtual. So please check it out. So thanks again, everybody. All right, good night.